Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today we're going to be checking out another song from Shining. This time, the title of the track is not something I can pronounce. It is
Längtar Bort Från Mitt Hjärta.
And it translates roughly to longing or yearning away from my heart. The requester has opted to stay anonymous for this one. I am opting to not showcase the album art. It is not something I would like to display on my channel, and if you want to go search it out, trigger warning, it is suicide related, so explore at your own peril, I suppose, is how that goes. So let's dive into this, see what Shining is bringing to the table. Really sharp hits on those quick little hammer-ons. I wanted to call them trills so bad. With that heavy reverb, the soaring melody line over top, just the somber element here. It reminds me of one of Metallica's ballads. Ooh, threw that odd accent in there. I love all the little imperfections in here. Not every note has the same length to it. It almost feels like some of them are unintentionally muted. Like the right hand just gets a little too close to one of the strings, or maybe there's a, I don't know, based on their chord shape, like maybe one of their fingers grazes a string too much and all you get is the attack and not much else. Really great way to transition in from the last idea to this one. Interesting. pretty simple, just like rhythmic idea underneath all this. Uh, Kind of afraid for what this leads to, but you can hear animosity dripping off of the lyrics. It's not like any other harsh lyrics that we've heard that are just harsh for harsh sake, kind of. There's contempt in these in the delivery itself. I can even hear that uh, through the language barrier. The song really feels like it wants to go towards a sorrowful angle, and just something doesn't allow it to. Interesting idea there. They're also taking a bit of a bluesier idea, which I think I talked about the song wanting to get a bit heavier.
Gradually, then suddenly. That's how depression is. You wake up one morning afraid that you're going to live.
I love those ghost notes on the snare. Definitely a bit of a creeping element, and I think having the swung eighth notes in here is an interesting vibe to give it, as well as it being a pretty traditional blues kind of concept foundationally. We have a piano, a bass, and some very lightly played drums. We'll get into that right now, I suppose. Uh, yeah, no reason not to, I guess. And so that ending section, we've talked about this a few times before. I'm going to keep it a little brief to keep the analysis rolling. But for those who haven't heard a couple of my pieces on this, a huge difference between rock drumming and jazz drumming is intensity. With rock and metal drummers, you tend to have these really big, wide arm movements. Tends to be lots of force on these instruments. Well, on the drums, the percussion instruments, each other instruments. You get really loud cracks on the snares. You get loud shimmers on the cymbals. The cymbals like rocking back and forth for minutes at a time. It's just a really aggressive style of playing. And when you look at jazz, it's a lot of wrist movement and just not a lot of intensity. It's more about adding a bit of texture and small rhythmic components, especially since the bass is typically driving the rhythm, not necessarily the drums in jazz music. It's there mostly for just a little bit of extra oomph, right? It's just a lot of little things, right? Nice, just like smooth, right? Very different. And we can hear that huge shift when we listen to the first and second sections of this track. The drums have largeness to them. They're very aggressive, very big and meaty, very rock and metal. And that final one, though, it pulls it back a little bit. We have a lot of ghost notes in there. The volume dynamic has dropped massively. We are in something that would be close to a piano right here. Not piano the instrument, piano the volume dynamic. Um, yeah, on sheet music, volume is dictated not by like decibels or numbers, but by words. Most of them being Latin words that I don't know all of them. I'm just familiar with what's shown on paper. So we have P for quiet, piano, and F for loud, which is forte. And the more P's or F there are, the louder or quieter you're supposed to be. Like two P's is pianissimo. Pianissimo. There we go. Don't know why that took so long to say. And that's quieter than piano. And then you have forte and oh well, there's also the M. I think there's an M because I know there's an it's been a long time since I've dealt with this because, a lot of the stuff I do digitally, volume's all done with numbers and dials and sliders, even in notation software, because I'm not making music to hand out to musicians anymore, sadly. But there's mezzo forte, and I'm pretty sure that's MF, but there's some funny things that can come up in sheet music because of that. But I'm pretty sure mezzo forte, I'm pretty sure is represented with an MF. And it's a different type than forte or double forte. I don't know if there's a Latin word for that. There probably is. I've always called it double forte. Um, yeah. So when I said that it feels more like a piano, I'm not talking about the instrument piano. I'm talking about the volume dynamic piano. So it's a quieter drumming. It is less forceful. It's more restrained. We have less elements happening in it, which is also very jazzy. And we've swung our eighth notes. We've moved to this bluesy swing idea. So yeah, just a huge shift in that section that tells me that the composer and the performers have a lot of variety in their style. Even comparing this to the Shining that we checked out last week, there's just a lot of variety in here. And I already know, man. When we get to the lyrics, it's going to be brutal. But it sucks because I enjoy a lot of the variety that the band is bringing. They can really take me to interesting places, and the music, at least for me, I mean, last week it was kind of on par, right? We got the heaviness of black metal with like a really aggressive set of lyrics, kind of fits. But here, like, aside from the vocal delivery, which, like I said, had a lot of contempt and just upsetness to it, it was, when you kind of have to say you're sorry to someone, but you're not, and you kind of grit through your teeth, and you're just like, I'm sorry. like that kind of thing. Like that's what every line felt like. There's just so much anger and contempt for what was happening or who this person was speaking to in the lyrics. And I got that even through the language barrier. So like I know these lyrics are going to be brutal. They are. But it really does not feel like what the music's representing here. So, we kind of talked about that last section. The bass is doing some really nice bass things. There's a piano that's kind of adding in these little chordal ideas. The bass leads the section. It is actually a very jazzy rhythm section where the bass is the foundation, the piano adds a little bit on top of that, and the drums add a little bit on top of that rhythmically. It's actually kind of bonkers how, it's still a very rock composition. You would not hear anything like that in classic jazz stuff, but the sonic qualities and some of the tools that are being utilized here, like the swung eighths and the quieter drums and the distribution of rolls, are very jazzy. It's interesting because, at least to me, it shows a nuanced understanding of blues music, not just the sound of blues. And they paired a lot of the techniques of blues with a more rock style of composition. What notes are specifically being chosen? But yeah, it shows, like I said, a strong understanding of blues, which is just not something I would take from a black metal band. So yeah, that section, I think we've covered everything on it. And then there's like the small metric modulations, the little triplet feel that we get every once in a while, those really nice ghost notes on the snare, kind of accenting in between beats, and that came up another time later where it wasn't ghost notes. It was actually the piano doing a bit of call and response against the downbeat triplet stuff going on in the bass and drums, and the piano was filling in a triplet that was just a hair later. So we got this nice little bum ba bum ba bum ba bum kind of feel for a little bit. Just so good. And again, very jazzy. It's the little variations. It's not about huge ideas and huge fluctuations of concepts. It's about little licks that you put in every once in a while. And it blows my mind, actually. Like I said, how much of a strong understanding of jazz went into that section without actually making it blues. It is still a heavily rock idea that just the foundation is so jazzy. It's just so good. The song opens up with some really moody atmospheric stuff. I mentioned that it sounds like a Metallica ballad, and I still stand by that. It's not just the fact of how it's written compositionally, which is mostly a repeating lick on the bottom and some minor chord stuff, some light drum stuff, simple bass line, and a soaring melody with wide reverb on it. It does sound a lot like The Unforgiven, right? But it's also the production of it, the placement of everything, the wide reverb, the type of guitar tone they're aiming for. It feels very much to me like 90s rock ballad stuff. It's just kind of, again, very different from the black metal, not even just compositionally, but production wise, the sounds that they're going for, the tones for their guitar. And where they're using effects and what effects they are avoiding using. There isn't a single part of this that feels black metal to me. This is a very different side of Shining than when we checked out. I'm not going to remember the title. I'm pretty sure it's in Swedish. Um, but yeah, it's such a different side to them, and it's interesting. So we have this opening idea, and it pretty much just broke that down as well. Soaring idea, some foundational stuff, and just really emotive guitar or melody writing for that lead guitar. I'm not going to say it was anything that was going to move me to tears, but definitely something that was trying to elicit a type of somberness, right? Some sort of sadness or weariness, or just, a general sense of melancholy. And the transition from that into the distorted guitars, into the heavy drums, into the more driving section was really well done. It was little pieces here and there. We were gonna, we changed the drums, we changed the guitars, instead of doing a lead melody, we start introducing the riff next, and then we bring the new bass idea in, and then we bring the drums up to maximum, and everybody can come in at what they're doing. Now it's just this really nice stepwise idea transferring from our intro into what I would call the meat of the song. This is where all the lyrics took place. This had the core riff. We were in it the longest, I think. It's probably something close to like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, leaving like 2 minutes for the intro and about 2 minutes for the outro. That sounds about right. And there was not a lot of moving around in here. This section was pretty much one note, much like the other two sections. We had a driving guitar lick that had some really interesting uses of, I kept wanting to call them trills because that's exactly what we would call them on woodwind instruments. Even brass, basically anything air-based, we would call them trills. But just really quick hammering on one note and going back to the last note and getting this quick hammer-on effect. Occasionally it even sounded like you might have been doing it with string bends instead, but it's basically just moving up to one note and coming back down. A lot of it here sounded like they were half note or whole note, just very close relationships between the notes, probably just the next note up in the scale or in the key. Um, and we hear a few of them isolated in the riff at the beginning, but once we moved into the core riff that we heard for the majority of the section, it was used to punctuate the end of a phrase by having this rising step, da-la-la, 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 coming back down to the bottom to start the riff over again. Very ear catching the first time. I think I even sparked up a little bit, like, whoa, it was cool. By like the 10th time it happened, it was decidedly less cool and more just what the song was doing. But it's still a really neat way to, like I guess I said, catch the ear, to bring attention to it, more so than maybe it's just because it feels fresher to me. But at least to me, it's more of an ear-catching idea than just da 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 dun 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 da 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 da. It feels like I hear that all the time, just a rising idea. And this is a rising idea as well, but it's done stepwise with these little trills or hammer-ons, whatever you want to call them, on the way. And it's just, yeah, just a little bit unique. It's a unique flair, something I haven't heard before. Caught me, or it could just be the complete novelty of the idea, right? Maybe it's really not that much more impressive than any other ending lick to a phrase, but just, I don't think I've heard anything like that on the channel yet. So the drums are just going at it, hammering home, laying the rhythm down. The bass is doing what the guitars are doing, which is interesting because in the intro and outro, the bass has its own idea. But here in this middle section, follows a pretty typical rock pattern of just following the guitars for notes and the bass kick for rhythm. The big difference here between the other two sections, which we're completely devoid of, we have vocals, and I already mentioned that they're a harsh vocal that has this dripping contempt to them. There's a hatred to it, and yeah, I think that's about it, right? This song goes through three ideas. Each idea is one concept long, just repeats until the section's over. And they kind of move through three basic ideas. We have a 90s rock ballad, and then some 90s 2000s hard rock, and then so I don't know, some jazzy foundation with rock concepts on it that dig into some chords that I don't really think we'd ever hear in jazz. And that's the whole song. When did this come out? I'm curious now. So this was their fifth album, 2007. Yeah, I guess that'd be about right for the time. Is it 90s, 2000s rock? I think is a heavy influence on multiple sections of this track. Let's get into the lyrics. I have a couple of sources for these lyrics. We have one that seems to be hand translated with some notes that I'm definitely going to use We have a Google translation, which has some oddities, and then a Deep L translation. I'm going to be using bits of all three of them to kind of piece together what I think is more of a definitive idea. There are a couple of choice words in here that I'm certainly going to omit. But I do want to point out that whereas in other lyrics, when I tend to omit choice words, it's usually done because I don't feel like they add too much to the sentence other than just to exist, maybe to fill up space, maybe to take up syllabic placement so that the flow of the sentences can, be better, just have a better flow, have those extra syllables in there. Here, though, I need to bring it up specifically because I feel like it adds to the overall vibe of the song. It is a very aggressive set of lyrics. There are aggressive words in it. And again, I will be omitting them, but I do want to point that out because I do feel like they are a strong component of the storytelling, so to speak. So it says, for every step I take, you're lying there lurking, fooling me into blindness. Wake up from the path of my fate, or maybe away from the path of my fate. Or gone from the path of my destiny. So yeah, definitely, it says you're fooling me into blindness that's going to lead me away from my destiny. That's the general gist there. So every step I take, you're waiting for me to blind me from my destiny and lead me somewhere else. That's the general gist here. This next area has, I don't think there's a real strong translation, any of them. My madness into tranquility and my disability into insanity. Something along those lines. It says, you misplaced emotional bank. And this actually, the hand translated one has a note that says this is possibly some sort of idea of somebody who is filled with emotions, much like a bank is filled with money, right? It's interesting because it's actually a word. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right because there's two dots above the A, but Kanzlobank, which at least in like more straight English, a very American way of saying this would be Kanslow Bank. The word bank is literally in there. Kanslow, I'm going to assume, has something to do with emotions. So, like, quite literally, I think it is a word that means emotional bank. There's just not a real strong translation for that into English. But the gist is, from what I'm understanding, somebody who's just full of emotions, right? Says you misplaced emotional bank. I'm bouncing between all three of these, by the way, because I'm trying to make sure that I get like a really good idea of what's going on here. Anyways, after this says, I want to kill you. I'm going to kill you. I have to murder you. Show me your world. I'll destroy it. Expose me your dreams. I'll shatter them. Reveal your sources of joy, and I will murder them. This is what I'm talking about. That utter contempt in the vocals. We go back to the last idea. Once again, says you misplaced trash of an emotional bank. I want to kill you. I'm gonna kill you. I have to kill you. And that's everything that is said by the vocalist. Now, if we stopped right there, I think I'd have a very similar response to this as I did with the last song that we checked out from them, Tormentor, O Holy Tormentor. In that, once again, we have a narrator who seems very upset at somebody and is supportive of ideas of darkness and wants to kill somebody who isn't in that darkness, wants to lead them into it. Um, But between what some people said in the comments for that one and this last line here during the jazzy section, I would never have picked this up, so I'm really thankful to the person who hand translated this for me. The last line is said by a female voice, and it says, "Gradually, then suddenly, that's how depression hits. You wake up one morning afraid that you're going to live." And I would never have known that this was a quote taken from a film called Prozac Nation. In fact, they say that the actress who says it is Christina Ricci, and yeah, the voice seems to fit, so I'm going to guess it's a straight up soundbite. Um, and this recontextualizes everything. One second. So, I read a couple of comments in the last video that what's actually happening is not that the lead singer is asking the person they were speaking to delve into darkness and eventually commit suicide. That the vocalist was speaking through the lens of their own depression, speaking to themselves and telling them that that's what they should do. And in which case, I now view that song as a little bit more closer to the realm of utilizing art to explore dark topics, especially if the vocalist themselves does suffer from clinical depression and deals with these thoughts and has found a productive way of taking these things and channeling them into an art form. And if we take that here as well, with this final quote, kind of recontextualizing the song as uh, depression speaking to the person who's depressed, we can start off at the beginning. It says, "For every step I take, you're lying there and hiding, trying to lead me into blindness and taking me from my path of destiny." So this is the person speaking to the depression. Every step of the day, you're there waiting to sway me from what I'm supposed to be doing. Then we get to see it from the perspective of the depression. Calls this guy a misplaced emotional bank and says, "I want to kill you. Show me what you have. I'll destroy it. Tell me your dreams. I'll get rid of them. Tell me your sources of joy and I'll murder them." And there's a lot of people who suffer from depression, and depression takes the joy out of their life. Things that they once loved, they no longer do. This could be anything from hobbies to crafts to just, anything that they enjoy doing. So from this angle, I think it's a phenomenal song from an artistic angle. Again, I'm not going to listen to this song, just like I'm not going to listen to the last one. It's a topic that I'm not super comfortable with, and not a style of song that I want, or not a set of lyrics that I want going through my head just casually through the day, right? It's going to be a bit of a bummer for me. But I can appreciate it for what it's for. And I think that's what's going on here, and I think possibly that's what was going on with the last one as well. I do have one problem with this, though. I was also informed by another commenter that the vocalist here really loves making people feel uncomfortable. Specifically creates music with shock lyrics or aggressive music itself in order to make the listener uncomfortable. And if the music can make someone sad or even drive them to depression and suicide themselves, then the vocalist is happy with what they've done. I need to read a little bit more into this band and the vocalist to figure out if that is true or not. If it is, oh man, I don't think it changes the idea that this song or that song, the last one we checked out, could be viewed artistically. But it also brings a new intent to the music that I cannot condone at all. And it makes me once again feel very negative about having this song on the channel and introducing it to people, especially more so that I praise the musical aspect. Once again, I don't know who writes the music. I don't know if it's also the lyricist, the vocalist. I don't know if it's someone in the band, maybe the guitarist does it. Both of these songs have done really interesting things with the genres that they do and pushing them in new directions and introducing different concepts. I'm still very kind of flabbergasted that the jazz aspect was so meticulously and detailedly implemented into this rock style. There's stuff about the music I really enjoy. And I feel kind of bad promoting that again because of some of the overtones that the lyrics and possibly the goals of the lyricist could be introducing to it. So, like I said, I have to look that one up. I'm going to leave that in as a star. Right now, it's hearsay. I have heard that this might be a goal of the vocalist. Um, I don't want that to be slander. I am putting an asterisk there that I'm not 100% certain on this, but it is something that is in my head right now based on comments I have just recently read. And I guess I will do an addendum of some sort because I do take this very seriously. If this is indeed the goal of the vocalist, I don't necessarily want to continue to put this on the channel. Um, so yeah, I will be doing some research and we'll see what I come up with, and maybe I'll do a community post about it and let y'all know what I find. So yeah, that's that. And like I said, going back to theme, I don't really hear anything in the music outside of the vocal delivery that lines up with much of this at all. The beginning is kind of somber, and there is a bit of a darkness there at the end, which I think could be interpreted as. Um, actually, no. Actually, the themes of this song line up really well. We have like a lead in of something sorrowful and melancholy that's like depression coming on, and then the aggressive bit is when you are depressed and everything is bleak and black and white and you don't have joy, and the vocalist is talking about wanting to take all the joy away from this person, personifying the depression itself, and then that leads into just sort of an empty void that's kind of removed all of the outright aggression, but is still kind of there, which meets up with the opening line about every step I take, the depression is always there. It never leaves. It's just biding its time, waiting to strike. And that's kind of what the ending feels like, where it's not the sorrowful aspect isn't a strong component to the section emotionally, but it's underlying. It could jump out at any time and move right back to that last section. That's kind of what I'm getting there. So yeah, I mean, thematically, I think all of this comes together really well at musically showing multiple stages. I don't want to say stages, multiple moments of having depression and battling it, and really leaning into the idea that it is a constant daily battle and not something you get over in a week or whatever. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts on this Shining track. Still very torn on it, much like last time, but maybe more so now on whether I should actually be putting this stuff up here or not. Um, Hit me up with your comments. Let me know what you thought of this one, if you enjoyed it or not, anything that stood out to you, or anything you want to add on to what I said, or correct what I said. When you're done commenting, you can head up to the description box and there's a link for Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. Has a bunch of stuff for the channel. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.